Hi there, my name is Zachary Cartwright. I'm a food scientist and an isotherm application consultant here at Meter Group. Today we'll be discussing the AQUALAB Vapor Sorption Analyzer and just going over the top 10 facts about this instrument. The first fact about the AQUALAB VSA is that this is a moisture sorption isotherm generator. So in the food industry, it's primarily used to look at the relationship between water activity and percent moisture content. In the pharmaceutical industry, it can also be used to look at percent relative humidity versus water capacity. And then for soils applications, we might change this y-axis to gravimetric water content. So no matter what industry you're in, this is primarily used to look at the relationship between water energy as well as water quantity. And we use this to look at the complete moisture map for your sample or for your product. So it tells us everything that we need to know about the water in that sample or product. The second fact about the AQUALAB VSA is that it's used to tackle a wide range of R&D challenges, primarily in the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, as well as soil applications. Now, each of these industries is going to have its own unique set of challenges. In the food industry, it's primarily used to maximize moisture content for profit and set production specs to make sure you can get as much water in that product as possible while maintaining your safety and your quality. It can also be used to understand and avoid unwanted texture change, especially things like caking and clumping and loss of flowability. Isotherms can be used to calculate a shelf life based on water activity changes over time. This means that you can also use this data to choose your packaging and make sure you're using the correct water vapor transmission rate. Isotherms can be used to understand impacts of temperature change, especially during shipping and storage. And then it can also be used to accelerate formulation processes. So I know R&D scientists are always trying to speed things up, and you can actually do some modeling right there on your computer instead of having to physically make every formulation. The pharma industry might use some of these same challenges or use the same data to tackle these types of challenges, but in addition, they also use isotherms to predict hydrate formation, model moisture migration, especially between fill and capsule, and then choose excipients and compare relative hygroscopicity. And then finally, for soil applications, isotherms can be used to investigate shrink swell capacity, also called expansiveness or plasticity. We can use isotherms to compare soil composition and then also to create wetting and drying curves. So lots of different applications depending on the industry that you're in. And I also thought it would be helpful to focus on the food industry and just show you the different market segments that isotherms are used for. So it's used a lot for powders. You can think of infant formula or drink powders, anything that's in powdered form that you're trying to prevent caking and clumping. We can also investigate bakery products, cold pressed bars, snack foods, especially things that have an ideal texture, candies and confections ranging from chocolates to gummies. We can look at cereals and grains, nutraceuticals and supplements, pet food and animal feed, especially this is a growing industry that continues to use isotherms, films, coatings and encapsulations, freeze-dried products. We work a lot with packaging companies so that they can direct their clients to use the right type of packaging, food solution companies or third-party consulting labs. And then finally, we partner with lots of universities so that they can have this technology in their lab for their graduate and undergraduate students so that they have an understanding of isotherms and how they can be used. The third fact about the AQUALAB VSA is that it comes with the Moisture Analysis Toolkit software, or the MAT. This is something that really makes our instrument stand apart from other isotherm generators, because other isotherm generators usually just provide you with some type of table readout or Excel format, and then they leave the data interpretation up to you. Our instrument comes with the MAT software, and it helps you to take those isotherms and turn them into a range of solutions, whether you're looking for a texture transition point, calculating a shelf life, predicting water activity at different temperatures, and so on. Now, it makes it really easy to use because all of the moisture equations that you need are right there in one point, or in one spot. So you don't have to go and look through different papers or read different books. We've already done the research for you, and everything that you need, all of those equations are right there in the software. And then we've also developed some quick calculators for you to use. We used to use this internally. We used to have a bunch of spreadsheets so that we could do the calculations. And then we decided that we needed to make this available to the scientists that we work with. So we've developed these calculators to make things easier for you so you can quickly get the answers that you need. The fourth fact about the AQUALAB VSA is that it uses the dynamic dewpoint isotherm method, or the DDI method. This is a patented method that we developed here at Meter Group. And the way that it works is that we either pulse over dry or wet air continuously over the top of your sample. And then during this process, we gravimetrically track the moisture content and then directly measure the water activity. This is something else that makes our instrument stand apart, because other instruments make the assumption that the relative humidity in the chamber is equal to the water activity, but we're actually taking that water activity measurement. This allows us to get results within a couple of days or sometimes even faster, and your isotherm will be composed of hundreds of data points. So let me show you an example. This is an example for spray-dried milk powder, and I want you to bring your attention to that DDI curve in dark blue or dark purple. You'll notice two things. One, the amount of data points used to make this curve, and the second thing is that you can notice inflection points. For example, there's an inflection point around 0.4, and that point correlates to the glass transition point for this product. So if you don't have the DDI method, if you're only using this other method called DVS, you can very easily step over these inflection points. And we'll talk more about the DVS method here in just a second. The fifth fact about the AQUALAB VSA is that it also comes with that DVS, or that dynamic vapor sorption isotherm method. Now this is more of a classic method, maybe something that you're familiar with. This is where the sample is held under constant conditions until an equilibrium is reached. So this is really good for evaluating sorption kinetics or time-dependent physical changes, but it does take a little bit longer to collect this data, maybe several weeks depending on how many data points. So usually somewhere between 6 and 9 data points is what I've seen used for this method. So let's look at that same graph from the previous slide, and this time bring your attention to that red DVS curve. So each of the points in this curve has reached equilibrium, but if we were to look at a graph showing the time difference, that DDI curve took only a few days, where that DVS curve can take several weeks to produce. Now these two methods can be used together to help you answer some of your R&D challenges, and we'll look at that next. All right, the sixth fact about the AQUALAB VSA is that the DDI and the DVS method can be used on the same sample. So this is the only instrument that is capable of both methods, and the test setup allows you to set up for at least 20 unique stages. Truthfully, I've never seen 20 stages, but you could do up to 20. So let's look at an example using 3 different stages. So here, this product has a starting water activity and moisture content around 0.6 and 10% respectively. The first step here is basically a DVS step where we allow the product to reach equilibrium at 0.1 water activity. Then using the DDI method, I created an adsorption curve up to about 0.9 water activity, and then looped the test to do a desorption curve back to that starting 0.1 water activity. So in general, you can use these tests on the same sample, or you can investigate on 2 different samples. So for example, you could use the DDI method to identify your critical water activity, and then on a separate sample, you could use the DVS method to determine how long it takes to reach that critical point. The 7th fact about the AQUALAB VSA is that it can be used to investigate a wide temperature range as well as a wide relative humidity range. So isotherms can be generated anywhere between 15 and 60 degrees Celsius. And here's an example of why that's important. So here we're looking at spray-dried milk powder. To the far right is the isotherm at 15 degrees Celsius. And then each of those lines is an increase in 5 degrees up to 40 degrees Celsius. So you'll notice that the shape of that curve is changing according to temperature. And this also means that that inflection point, or that critical water activity value, is also going to change with temperature. Now we can use isotherms at 3 different temperatures to predict the water activity at any temperature. And then something that we've been working on recently is taking the VSA and putting it at colder temperatures like 4 degrees Celsius, and also being able to collect isotherms at these lower temperatures. As far as relative humidity, we can investigate anywhere between 3% to 95% relative humidity, or 0.03 to 0.95 water activity. The 8th fact about the AQUALAB VSA is that it's a standalone instrument. So it only requires your standard power cord and outlet, 120 volts, 60 hertz. So all you have to do is plug this instrument and it's in and it's good to go. There's no external gas required. There is an option to connect external gas if you'd like, but in general, if you just want to use the desiccated dry air from the desiccant tubes, then you're ready to go and analyze your sample. There's also no pre-drying step required, so you don't have to put your sample in an oven first. If you want to do any drying down and changing your water activity before the test, then that can be done in the instrument itself. The 9th fact about the AQUALAB VSA is that it's really easy to use and maintain. So setting up a test takes about 5 minutes. You will need to connect an external PC or laptop to the AQUALAB VSA, and then you'll use the Moisture Analysis Toolkit software to set up your test. Now, as far as reoccurring costs, they're actually quite low for this instrument. It just includes the desiccant that you see there on the front of the instrument. It includes water activity standards. These are the same standards that we use for our other instruments here at Meter. And then we also recommend an annual calibration. During that service, we make sure to update any internal components. So if we've upgraded the instrument since it was last in our laboratory, then we make sure to update it, and that way your instrument is basically brand new. We also renew your 1-year warranty. So if anything goes wrong with your instrument, if we've touched it, if it's been in for its annual calibration, then we will fix anything that goes wrong with the instrument. All right, the 10th and final fact is that the VSA can handle small amounts of volatile compounds. So if you're working with something that has ethanol or polyglycerol, acetic acid, terpenes, spices, and so on, then you'll be prompted when you set up a test to tell the instrument whether or not volatiles are present. If volatiles are present, then you're going to switch to this capacitance sensor where my arrow is on the screen. So behind that filter that you see is the capacitance sensor. You can change out this filter over time. So this is really helpful if you're working with products with small amount of volatile compounds. We can also walk you through the setting up the test to make sure you're choosing the correct sensor. All right, finally, a couple bonus facts. I thought it would be good to just include some information about the history of the AQUALAB VSA. Now, this technology was first released in 2007 with the AquaSorp. There's still many of these instruments out there running and still being used to collect dynamic dewpoint isotherm information. So this was the first instrument with that DDI method. It actually won an award in 2008 from the Institute of Food Technologists. It won the Innovation Award in that year. Now in 2012, we replaced the AquaSorp with the AQUALAB VSA. We realized that it was really important to be able to use the DDI method as well as the DVS method. So again, this is the only instrument capable of both methods. As of the filming of this video, over 300 units have been produced. There are over 80 North American companies currently using the VSA, and then it can be found all over the world in at least 27 countries. Now, if you're interested in learning more about the AQUALAB VSA and learning how it fits your application, here are the email addresses. Either for North America, you can connect with our sales team here, or internationally, I recommend reaching out to Deanna. Deanna is our international sales account manager, and she can get you connected either with the right Meter Group office or one of our distributors. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. We appreciate your time, and we're looking forward to having you watch our next video that we put out.